Hello, I'm Jenny Spinner, Chief Editor of Snack Food and Wholesale Bakery. Mondelēz International has just come out with its fourth annual State of Snacking Report, a global study developed in partnership with the Harris Poll. This study is a fascinating look at consumer snacking preferences and the factors that drive the purchasing behaviors and decisions. Here to share some insights and highlights is Nick Graham, Global Head of Insights and Analytics at Mondelēz. Nick, thanks for coming. Great to have you.
Thanks for inviting me, Jenny. Great to be here.
I'm wondering if you could please start off with a snapshot about the poll in terms of the regions you reached into, consumers you reached out to, anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, this is our fourth annual Global Consumer Trends study. It sits on top of all of the other work that we do during the year. And through it, we cover 13 markets around the world, across North America, Latin America, Europe, Africa, and Asia Pacific. And really, the aim of this is to make sure that we're keeping our finger on the pulse, keeping the consumer at the center of everything we do, really understanding their evolving needs, attitudes, behaviors related to snacking, how they're making decisions about what snacks that they choose, and really importantly, starting to anticipate and plan for the future consumer and shopper trends that we see in this.
It's interesting. Now, one of the things the study reveals is that consumers are keenly interested in sustainability. Please tell us a little bit about that interest and how it factors into snacking choices.
Absolutely, and this is obviously something that we've seen building for some time, right? It's not a new trend from that perspective. Certainly what we've seen is post the first big wave of the pandemic, when obviously other things took precedence, we've really seen that focus on sustainability come back. So in the most recent report, 2/3 of the consumers we spoke to said that they're really actively looking for snacking solutions that help them minimize their environmental impact. Now, unsurprisingly, that's even bigger amongst the younger generations. But what's interesting is it really now starts to span across all generations. So really starting to recognize the impact that the food and snacking choices that we make can have on the environmental impact. And roughly speaking, there are three main areas that surface as we dig into what does that mean to consumers. The first, really top of mind, is about reducing packaging waste. So we've consistently seen that within the context of snacking, that's really the big priority for consumers. So 70% really say that they really want to prioritize snacking that has less packaging, more biodegradable, more recyclable packaging, and really thinking beyond just recyclability, really thinking about biodegradable and regenerative packaging as well. So really that's been a big part, sustainability has been a big part of our focus, particularly in packaging waste. So we have a big goal over the next few years to make sure that 100% of our packaging is designed to be recycled. And I think really importantly that we provide guidance on how to recycle it, because probably like me, you look at something and think this is recyclable, and then you realize that you have to take it to this particular place, so it's only recyclable if you take off this label. So really providing guidance for people on how to do that. So we just run an initiative in the UK, Ireland, and Australia with Cadbury Dairy Milk, one of our chocolate brands, where there's a little mini QR code on the back which told you how to recycle it, where to recycle it, really to give people direction and guidance on how to recycle. So that's the first thing, is around packaging waste. The second one is around the environmental impact of our production process and our ingredients as well. So really you see that consumers increasingly saying that they're looking for snacking brands to reduce the carbon footprint of their production processes, and looking for ingredients, particularly plant-based ingredients, that have a lower environmental impact as well. So on the production side, we have a big focus on reducing CO2 emissions and ensuring that our ingredients are all sourced from sustainable sources. I think one of the really interesting trends that's emerged in the last few years, and we've seen it everywhere we go, right? Every restaurant, every store that you're in is around plant-based. So we've seen a real resurgence and emergence in interest in plant-based products, particularly if you think about a lot of our chocolate brands and candy brands in dairy replacements. So I think there's 2/3 of the people we spoke to this year said that they'd be interested in trying a plant-based version of their favorite snack bar, and a third of people claim they already have, or certainly that they're very passionate about it and really interested in it. Actually, last year we launched our Cadbury Plant Bar in the UK. We're looking to roll it out to other parts of the world as well. So replacing the dairy part with almond milk. So really starting to test the water in the alternative milks and alternative dairy space as well. And I think the last part is then also really obviously fair labor and welfare practices as well obviously continues to become important. Again, I think coming out of the pandemic, it was definitely there before, but that reinforcement on values and giving back. And so obviously that's part of the reason we take very seriously our commitment to transparency, fairness and sustainability in our supply chain. So our signature programs, Cocoa Life, and then Harmony Wheat, and our goals around across all of those different programs as well.
That's interesting. Your report also says some other interesting things about snacking increasingly becoming a more mindful activity. Could you please elaborate a little bit more about that and what that means to consumers?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because we saw this trend again emerging before COVID. And like many things, COVID has been a bit of an accelerator, right, to some of those things that were already bubbling around in the landscape pre-2020. So one of the things we saw is that indulgence itself and pleasure and enjoyment seems to be changing. So it used to be this sort of guilty, frivolous treat, this sort of naughty pleasure. And what we've seen is actually over time, indulgence and enjoyment becoming sort of reframed as being part of a balanced life and actually really critical for self-care. So it's not naughty to indulge, actually, it's actually really important. And so we've seen that in this latest report, with actually 2/3 of consumers saying that we're actually trying to be less restrictive about how they eat. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not thinking about health and wellness, they're not thinking about nutrition, but just that they recognize that there's a role for pleasure and indulgence in life, and particularly given everything that we've been through in the last 2 years, 3 years, and everything we continue to go through, right, from economic uncertainty, just how important these moments of indulgence and pleasure are during the day, and actually how it's these sort of little comforts, these little luxuries that are actually really critical to our self-care. So rather than thinking of it as a naughty thing, really reframing it and thinking about it as critical to self-care. And I think one of the pieces of that we've seen through this report and some of our other work is consumers increasingly make an effort to be more mindful, more present when enjoying indulgent snacks. So if it's really a form of self-care rather than sort of mindless grazing, really making a push to slow down, truly experience what they're consuming with all their senses, truly enjoy the moment, as we're being told across everything, right? Just pause and enjoy that moment to its utmost. And so we've seen it again in this report that almost 4/5 of people saying that they are more likely now to try to take time to savor their indulgences, savor their little luxuries. And one of the other parts that we're seeing in that is also people using portion sizes and portion control, right? So typically, taking some time out to portion their snacks, using portion controlled sizes, just to take a little bit more time and really make them feel that they're being more knowledgeable and more mindful and more conscious of what they're consuming.
Here is a fact that I pulled out that I found particularly notable. The vast majority of consumers polled, 71%, snack at least twice a day. Not only that, snack time is increasingly supplanting mealtime. Can you tell us what the study reveals about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen, again, this is a trend that we've seen over the last 10 years in our snacking tracking data, and then most recently in the state of snacking as well, which is it's really driven by the search for convenience. So the sort of the breakdown of traditional meal times, both during COVID, obviously our entire lives were sort of thrown up in the air and we had to readjust. People were eating more at home, snacking more at home, changing their meal times. And then what we've seen is sort of post that initial phase, if you like, as people go back to working, commuting, really this real need for convenience, particularly in the morning. We've seen this huge rise in morning snacking around breakfast time, and breakfast time being replaced increasingly by snacks, just because it's convenient and it's a great way to get nutrition and sustenance while on the go. The other interesting thing has been around, again, because of fragmented lifestyles for lots of families, is it's not always easy to get the entire family together around the meal table, right? And so actually using snacking as a way to not necessarily just replace a meal, but also as a great way to bring the family together for a short period of time, right? So we can't all get together around the dinner table because people are going off to different activities, actually how do you use a moment of snacking to bring everybody together over a chocolate or cookie or whatever it might be. So these little moments of connection, in addition to convenience, really seem to be fueling the expanding occasions of snacking during the day.
Here's another figure that I found. Despite rising food costs, inflation just going nuts, 75% of consumers always find room in their budget for snacks. Could you please talk a little bit about that and what it might mean for retailers and even producers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a surprising finding for all of us, right? We know this times are very tough for everybody right now with the cost of living challenges in many countries that obviously affect our consumers, our employees, as well as us as manufacturers. What we see within that context is, and we've seen this across lots of different pieces of data, is that within all of the choices that we have to make from a spending perspective, that consumers are really prioritizing food, snacking, groceries, obviously in addition to other things like utilities, transportation, etc., over other spending, particularly things like out-of-home dining, out-of-home entertaining. People are deprioritizing those in favor of at-home eating and at-home snacking. And so I think this, first of all, it's high up people's priority list in the first place. I think the second thing, as we talked about before, is that, you know, in tough times, people turn to things that are familiar, things that are comforting. So we've seen that in this most recent study, 2/3 of consumers saying that in tough times like this, actually snacks, their favorite childhood snacks in particular, can really be something that they can count on, that can take their mind off of everything that's happening and just give them that moment of pleasure, indulgence, a little bit of mini escapism, if you like, back to that idea of that sort of mindful moment of pleasure and enjoyment. So really trying to use that moment to enjoy that moment and just sort of escape from the craziness that's around us right now. And obviously for us, as a manufacturer and for our retail partners, you know, we take that very seriously. We know that consumers are under a lot of pressure. So rather than just, you know, while we're under pressure from a pricing and a cost perspective as well, what's really critical is that we work with our retail partners to think what's the right way to take that pricing and manage that pricing. So it's not just about taking pricing, we have a much more systematic way to think about what are the price points that we can't go above, right? What are those critical price points? What are those moments and occasions where people might have a bit more disposable income, might be willing to pay a little bit more? So really thinking about this sort of systematic, the right pack, the right size, the right format, the right pricing for the right channel and the right occasion. So really trying to get the right price pack architecture so that people are still able to afford our snacks and brands and products.
That's great. Well, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else from the State of Snacking report you'd like to highlight, or any parting words you'd like to leave us with?
I'd just say that I mean, I'm enormously proud of the State of Snacking report. It's our sort of annual dip in the water of what's happening, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg, to continue the metaphor of everything that we're doing from a trend tracking perspective. So on top of annual reports like this, we have this always-on suite of tools that we use to look at both long-term systemic trends, so what's happening from a need, occasion perspective around snacking. That's where we saw some of the trends emerging around morning snacking. And then underneath this, we track 600,000 trends on a weekly basis, so different flavors, ingredients. I think every week somebody told me we have about 2.5 million new data points that we're ingesting to try and understand what's happening and what might happen in future, what some of those emerging trends are. So really together, all of this really helps us keep our finger on the pulse and provide that forward-looking view of where consumers' needs and behaviors are going. And so, yeah, no, excited to dig in more into the report.
Well, that's great. And anytime you have any information like that you want to share with us, we will then share with the readers of Snack Food and Wholesale Bakery.
I would love to. Look forward to coming back and talking again at some point, Jenny.
Well, Nick Graham of Mondelēz International, thank you for your time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching.